Jordan and Gretzky, Serena and Ruth. Remembering great ones is easy to do. But what about the no-names who spent their whole lives long-snapping footballs and catching sack flies? They're guys, remember that guy. Remember that guy, remember that guy, remember that guy, remember that guy. They're just gonna remember some guys now.
Clippard looking for a clean inning here in the 7th. Ooh, hit well out to right center field. Jones still on the move, running out of room, and he makes the catch! Remember that guy. The show where we mine our memories for nuggets of nostalgia about peripheral players, past and present. Hello there, folks. It's me, James, and I am not the only one here that would like to relive some Dominican defeats and downfalls today.
Diaz celebrating a huge victory for Team Puerto Rico, and we have a very special guest with us today. It is actually the co-manager of roster management for Team Puerto Rico. Please introduce yourself.
That's right. It's me, the very special guest Xavier. We had to do a bullpen game. I'm glad that we got a lot of great pitchers out there. Just hate that it ended the way it did. Prayers up to Edwin.
The good news is it did free up Edwin Diaz's patellar tendon for an interview next week. That's right. Don't miss it next Monday. We will be speaking to the tendon of the hour. Are we going more into DRPR? Is that what's making memories for you guys right now?
I feel like we need to just touch on it a little bit because like the discourse around the WBC in the 24 hours, we're recording this Friday after Edwin Diaz's bizarre injury, just not
jueves,
even a dog pile.
Mi amigo, jueves, lo siento, no viernes.
Yeah, lo pasó el miércoles, perdóname. But yeah, just a weird fucking freak injury. It wasn't even a dog pile. Like, you can't even say they were being reckless in the celebration. It was just a very normal, light jumping around the mound.
No, I mean, you can't even tell how it actually happened because he's in the middle of it. It's not even like a Kendrys Morales. You're jumping high in the air, landing on a different surface than what you were just on. Just a freak injury.
A total freak injury. And a lot of dipshits is what I like to call them, have been saying online that this is proof that the World Baseball Classic shouldn't happen. And some people like Keith Olbermann even tried to say that it's just a money grab by MLB, which is like patently absurd and like something that only a white douche like fucking Keith Olbermann would say. That atmosphere at that game last night, we've been trying to figure out how to make baseball work in Miami for years. And we figured out last night how to make it work. Play into the native culture there that fucking loves baseball and is dying to be represented. It was a beautiful scene and something that can only happen in the World Baseball Classic. So the fact that there are people that would try to say that this is a bad thing, this is growing the game. This is growing the game globally. Like, at one point, the World Cup was a stupid international tournament too. You know what I mean? People are now trying to say the World Baseball Classic is silly. I think it's awesome. I think it kicks ass. I think it's horrible that Edwin Diaz got injured. Edwin Diaz could have gotten injured, as we've learned on this podcast, playing fucking Guitar Hero. Like, these things happen. True. They happen in freak ways, and I don't think you can attribute it to objectively, like, baseball has done a lot of stupid things since the turn of the century. World Baseball Classic has been the one thing, or one of the few things, I should say, that baseball has gotten right.
All fans other than Americans have enjoyed it.
That's the biggest thing, I think, Xavier, is Cespedes Barbecue talked about this earlier this week. The idea that everyone else is taking this so seriously and loving it so much, and like it's understandable to some extent that Americans aren't, because we see the highest level of baseball every year, and we see a shitload of it. We see 162 major league games of whatever team we support, not to mention everything else. So, like, there is an extent to which it makes sense, but at the same time, it gives you stuff you can't get otherwise, like you're saying, Diaz, with Miami. I mean, Cuba through to the semifinals with their win over Australia. Cuba could play the United States in the city of Miami, which would be one of, I think, the most insane international baseball games that's ever happened. As Cespedes Barbecue also pointed out this week, it'd be really weird. It's not like every ex-Cuban in Miami would be rooting for the Cuban team in a Cuba versus USA.
There would be a lot of Cubans rooting against Cuba, which would make it really weird.
It'd be bizarre. And Yoenis Cespedes left the team briefly. He said he would potentially come back if they made it to the semis in Miami, which is now in play. So just another way to make it nuts. That would require the U.S. to get past Venezuela, which my heart says they will do. But as I said earlier this morning to you guys, my brain is screaming at the top of its lungs. There is no way the U.S. is going to take on that Venezuelan pitching staff with full rest while they're also going up against probably the best lineup they've faced so far. Anthony the Bank Santander is absolutely going to cash in against the U.S. But no, I mean, I'm sorry about your dad, Diaz. I still think you guys got Mexico for what it's worth. It looks like it's going to be Japan, Cuba, Puerto Rico, and I mean, I'll hope for the U.S. in the semis. And maybe all of that is wrong by the time we put this episode out on Monday. Who knows? But we all love the WBC, and people who don't are dummies.
Very simply put. And I want to talk about some other dummies that are making memories for me.
Please do.
These are dummies that have been put in their place, I think, over the past 2 weeks, roughly. Folks, we've made no secret, at least I haven't, about my stance on the MVP debate in the NBA for the duration of our podcast. Nikola Jokic is an incredible offensive player. Basketball is a game that is played on both sides of the court. Jokic, you can argue, is a better offensive player than Embiid. I would still contest that point. Embiid is dominant defensively. And Jokic has been exposed in a very large way in the course of this 4-game losing streak for the Denver Nuggets. Your Spurs helping with my propaganda, James, just
astounding. I gave up on that game like 4 different times in the fourth quarter. I'm like, here's the run. And they just kept holding off. I have to look up the name of the fucking hero.
Oh, Sandro.
Yes, Sandro Mamushkov. Sorry.
He's Georgian. It's difficult. I get it.
It's fucking difficult.
One of the best players in the world right now in soccer is Kvicha Kvaratskhelia. And people just call him Kvara because they do not know how to say the rest of his name because he's Georgian. But I respect you. I respect you, country of Georgia. I will learn how to pronounce these names.
We do not respect Zaza Pachulia, but as a whole, we do respect you, Georgia.
I thought you were going to say we don't respect the state of Georgia.
We should never paint with a broad brush. A couple terrible people who happen to be in charge do not a bad state make, no matter how terrible those people may be.
And I mean, I think the most terrible people of all are the people that use statistics that they don't even fucking understand to try to explain things that aren't true. All last year, and like for a good portion of this year, people were trying to convince us that Nikola Jokic is not just an average defender, not just an above average defender, but no, he's actually like one of the top 10 defenders of all time because these numbers, which by the way, I've learned a lot about the analytics in the past week or two.
You need to know your enemy.
Defensive box plus minus, defensive rebounds are like a large basis of that. And like as an individual, and like this is where like you need to know ball. If you know ball, you know an individual player's defensive rebounding does not necessarily reflect on him. There's boxing out, there's schemes. Let's get 2 bodies on this guy and let's have the guard come in to get the rebound so that they can start the fast break. I don't give a fuck that Nikola Jokic gets every rebound for Denver because they fucking want him to because they want to pad his stats so that he can have a better argument for MVP. I don't give a shit about that.
That makes me assume that Nikola Jokic probably has some very similar defensive metrics by that same measurement as, say, Russell Westbrook during some stretches there in OKC.
Right, exactly, yeah, like Russell Westbrook, because Russell Westbrook...
Who's a great player, who we all love.
Right, and what are the counting stats that you can say defensively? You got steals, blocks, defensive rebounds. Russell Westbrook would make 6 idiotic decisions defensively in a game. But if 2 of them work out and he gets the steal, all of a sudden he's above like league average in steals. He gets 1 more, all of a sudden like, wow, Russell Westbrook had 3 steals in this game. He must have been great.
Stack the stocks.
Listen, I love stocks, but like stocks aren't everything. You need to know ball. You need to put stock in some other things defensively. But
it's always the best when you make yourself laugh and you can't keep going.
Let's get back on the tracks here, though. No, so last night, as of this recording, Joel Embiid dominated the Cavaliers, and he had one move. They sent the double. He split the double. He spun back away from the double. He was met at the rim by a third defender, and he just finished like very easily up through contact. Fat Boy can never do that. Fat Boy doesn't have the footwork for that. He doesn't have the elegance for it. He could have like maybe made like a nice pass to the corner for a 3, but anybody can fucking do that. Nobody can do what Joel Embiid does. And as I said, the tides are swinging as of this recording, and it might change by Monday. The betting markets officially favor Joel Embiid to win the 2023 NBA MVP. But really, my main argument, I think, is what Boogie Cousins said on Rachel Nichols' podcast. Giannis had his turn. Jokic had his turn. It's time for Embiid to get his flowers. We need to stop with this nonsense that the only thing that applies to the MVP is what happened this season. It is a narrative award. It is to tell the story of the National Basketball Association so that we can look at a list of MVPs and we can say, wow, in this decade, these were the guys. Or say, wow, this guy won 3 in a row, that he must have won 2 NBA finals and lost 1 NBA finals in that time. That's what Larry Bird did the last time that this actually happened. Certainly he's at least made it to an NBA finals if he's winning 3 in a row.
The only problem with that is LeBron should have many more, but was not given them because people got the tired of it / used to it thing.
Right.
That's one of the issues with humans. Voting will always make mistakes, and they'll always be swayed by things that they shouldn't be swayed by. But there's no better way to do it than what we have now. But right. LeBron should have twice as many MVPs as he has. And I'm not even like a crazy LeBron fan. He should have twice as many as he has right now.
Right. And I'm not trying to say that voter fatigue is a good thing. I'm saying that it is a thing. It has been a thing in the history of NBA MVP discourse and voting for the entirety of the league. It has been a thing. It has guided the way that has been formed. It's guided those conversations, and it's guided what the award means. The award isn't just the award for that season. We look over the course of the past 3 years. You want to say Jokic deserves 2 and Embiid deserves 1? I'm fine with that. So let's make it right this year, and let's vote for Joel Embiid.
Get out there and rock the vote, kids.
If I swung one vote, if we get a guest that talks to a person that's in like, that podcast made some cogent points. That's a person that knows ball. That's all I ever want to be said about me.
Well, speaking of ball, there is some basketball that's making memories for me. I would love to tell you guys about the new chapter in something we've discussed here a few times. That's the big men of the Portland Trail Blazers. It is a long and complicated history in a lot of ways. I mean, you got Bill Walton, you got Sam Bowie, you got Greg Oden. There is a new Blazers big man. I know it's a little bit past the trade deadline, but they did make a late addition. Say hello to a guy named Douglas Fur.
That's a great name.
Have you guys heard of Douglas Fur?
He sounds like he should be a net running striker for the German national team.
Go to Stanford. Please tell me he went to Stanford.
So he didn't go to school anywhere because he is a mascot. I would like you guys to guess, if I tell you that Fur is spelled F-U-R, what do you think Douglas Fur is?
Giant dog.
Is a fir a tree a thing? Is he a tree?
He is not a tree, and he is not a dog. Douglas Fur is a Sasquatch. Douglas Fur is new secondary mascot for the Portland Trail Blazers. He's not just a Sasquatch. He is specifically and canonically vegan. He is also a beanie and flannel wearing hipster Sasquatch. He basically looks, Diaz, I'm realizing as I say this right now, if your Tim Horton had a fursona, Douglas Fur would be the fursona of your imaginary Tim Horton. But he is joining Blaze the Trail Cat, who, if you go to the Portland Trail Blazers website, they say is their first mascot since 2002. However, that's a lie. This is the second Squatch for the Portland Trail Blazers. There was another Sasquatch that they had earlier in their time. There is this Washington native who then played in the NBA at one point for the Blazers named Dale Schluter. And Dale Schluter, from 1987 to 1989, was dressed up in a 9-foot Sasquatch costume and just called Bigfoot at the games, the mascot for the Portland Trail Blazers for these 2 years, and then they took some time off after it. Because in 1989, Schluter had a skit that he did during a game against the Golden State Warriors, where they made this really big replica of the Golden Gate Bridge, and he just stomped on it and destroyed it for a while they played I Left My Heart in San Francisco over the arena speakers. And Don Nelson, coach of the Warriors at the time, did not like this very much, and he raised a big old stink. And so that was the death of their initial Sasquatch. But We have finally made that right by bringing Douglas Fir here. Another thing, if you go to the website, they do clarify Douglas Fir is a little bit shy, so he's not available to be rented out for a mascot appearance yet. You can still get Blaze the Trail Cat. Hopefully we get a chance to meet Douglas Fir soon. I'm just glad that they finally got the star teammate that Damian Lillard has always deserved.
It's a beautiful nickname. It's a beautiful mascot. I do love there's like a tragic backstory here to the history of the Sasquatches in Portland.
I haven't seen anything that officially claims these two are related from the Trailblazers. So I don't want to assume that the two Sasquatches that happen to have been Portland Trailblazers mascots are related. That would be very prejudiced of me. But I mean, it's once again, if I had a nickel for every time Portland just kind of randomly debuted a Bigfoot as one of their new mascots, I'd have 2 nickels. Speaking of 2 nickels, or 2 coins at least, Xavier, can I get your 2 cents? What's making memories for you right now?
So, this is a very big week in sports. Everybody sitting down, tuning into their televisions, checking their phones, because it's Barkley Marathon week.
You're goddamn right it is. Immediately after Iditarod week. What a time for the brand.
This has been fantastic to just view through Twitter. I've had 2 separate people on the ground. I've had their Twitters open all day long. For anyone who has not listened to our Lazarus Lake episode, which you should because it's fantastic, the Barkley Marathon is a nominally 100-mile, but usually much longer, ultra-marathon through Frozen Head State Park in Tennessee. It is the most challenging ultra-marathon in the world. No one has completed it since 2017, and it's only been completed 18 times by 15 different runners in over 30 years of this 5-loop race. So, because of surprisingly good weather for this time in the mountains of Tennessee, this has been one of the most successful so far, which also makes it the least successful for Lazarus Lake. I have the Barkley tracker open right now. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 people completed the fun run, which is 3 loops of 20 plus miles each. 4 of them started off their 4th loop. Only 1 of those finished it and went out for another one before coming back. But there are 3 people still left out there on their 5th and final loop. They have 4 hours at this point to complete it. It is John Kelly. His nickname that they gave him is the Other Guy. Aurelian Sanchez, whose nickname is Another Bearded Guy. And Carol Sabi, whose nickname is Another Bearded Guy. We are hoping beyond hope that we can see those 3 finish in the next 4 hours, which would tie the best/worst performance ever. One of my favorite stories from this year is that, this is a direct quote from one of the reporters on the ground. One runner, after finishing his loop and dropping, cooked an egg burrito while showering. Like, took a camp stove and skillet into the shower, cooked the eggs, etc., and ate the tortilla in the shower. And that is exactly what I want from the Barkley Marathon every year. And this has just made me so happy. I can't wait to see what happens. I hope that Laz does something absolutely terrible to make it, get revenge for next year. He said that he's concerned that this will cause people not to apply because they'll perceive the course to be too easy. So I'm sure he's going to make it even more terrible next year. Can't wait to see if any of these 3 finish. And if so, how does Laz, take it up a notch next year?
Love it. Love the shower tortilla. Really appreciate that all of the nicknames he gave them will be very easy for us to discuss if we have a follow-up to this.
It's so good. I mean, the other nicknames of the people who at least finished the fun run: Big Smiling Guy, Tall Guy with Beard, Nondescript Guy, Small European Woman, Japanese Laz, who is a Japanese guy who dressed up like Laz, Guy with Glasses, and Guy with Mohawk.
Tag yourself. I'm Nondescript Guy.
But either way, it's been so fun to just keep an eye out on this.
I like that we get to know about it this time. This is the first time I've ever been aware of it as it happens. Did not really process, even when we were talking about it, that it immediately follows the Iditarod. Shoutouts to Ryan Reddington for his big win in the 2023 Iditarod, his first of his career. We love those endurance sports. We love looking back on those guys that we've discussed before, but we do have some guys to discuss today. And for the first time since early December, I get to select the category this time. It's been a bit of a dry spell, but I have for a while been kind of sitting on this topic. It's something I want to talk about. Virality. Like the very idea of guys, us remembering these small aspects that kept these athletes lingering in our heads, spreading throughout the collective consciousness. All of that, all of the people that we talk about are because we're latching on to those small little, at the risk of like thinking about Richard Dawkins for 2 seconds, those memes that come out and spread throughout our super ego as a society. I mean, not only does it change what we talk about in sports, it changes the way we talk about sports, particularly now that we're in the internet age where you can just respond with Alonzo Mourning nodding and everyone knows what you mean, even if people don't know who Alonzo Mourning is. Or Nick Young, quote unquote, draining a three. A way that you can respond to someone and it does mean something. While that is huge now, I do want to go a little bit further back for my guy today, because my guy predates the internet itself. And in fact, his viral moment is even going to predate the very first web browser, the very first like World Wide Web extension, any of that.
Predate the idea of viruses.
He doesn't predate the idea of viruses. We are post-viral theory, at least. But we are going to go back to an earlier period of the 20th century. And Diaz, I am very sorry. We do have to talk about, at least basketball-wise, your least favorite region in the world, which is Yugoslavia.
And let me be very clear. Big fan of Croatia, big enemy of Serbia. I know whose side I took in that conflict.
And how are your thoughts on Slovenia? Because those are the three primary ones.
Slovenia, also cool. Just Serbia.
Oh,
Serbia.
there's Luka Doncic.
They've given us a lot of basketball players. Yugoslavia's done that, but we're not going to talk about basketball. I do want to just we've talked about Yugoslavia many a time, but this time I'm going to give just the tiniest bit more background. It is the land of Southern Slavs, and it was basically just a union of Serbs, Croats, and Slovenes who all came together after the Ottoman Empire, which had ruled over that area for centuries, is completely dissolved after World War I. So they make Yugoslavia at that time. It is taken over by another, at least, attempt at an empire with the Third Reich. And then after Hitler does the one good thing in his life by shooting himself, after World War II ends, they reform it into the Socialist Federal Republic of Yugoslavia. It is not one of the SSRs in the USSR. It is more like East Germany, as we discussed before. But we are going back to that idea we talked about a lot last season of the Eastern Bloc Sports Project. The idea that it was a way of portraying might and legitimacy for the larger Eastern Bloc. In Yugoslavia, basketball, very popular, soccer, very popular, handball, very popular, and then, of course, winter sports. In fact, later when Yugoslavia in 1984 hosts the Sarajevo Olympics, they'll get their only ever Olympic gold in downhill skiing. But we don't want to talk about downhill skiing. We want to talk about something that's a little more risky, ski jumping. And a guy who is going to become known for a very famous almost ski jump. My guy today is,
I think I know who you're talking about.
You may indeed, because the guy I'm talking about is Vinko Bogataj.
No, that's not the guy I was thinking of.
Diaz, Vinko Bogataj?
Does not ring any bells, but I am fascinated to learn.
Something I will say as a bit of a tease. I guarantee with 100% certainty that you have seen Vinko Bogataj before in your life. I could not be more certain that the two of you as sports fans have. But let's go back to the beginning for Vinko Bogataj. He is born into that Socialist Federal Republic of Yugoslavia on March 4th, 1948. It's a town called Brezovica. It is now a part of Slovenia following the schisms in that country later on. Born into a big family. He's the seventh of 8 kids on the Bogataj family farm. That, by the way, if you're looking up for this guy, Bogataj. It's a silent J there at the end. What else is silent is any amount of information on the names of his other family members. Don't know his parents, don't know his siblings, but I do know, growing up, they're working on this farm. He eventually also starts to go to work in some of the industrial parts of the town, Brezovica. But in the meantime, he has hobbies. And one hobby that he develops, he, in his backyard, builds a downhill ski ramp. They got big property. So he's able to build his own downhill ski ramp, and he gets super into ski jumping, starting at the age of 9. By 15, he is working in a chain factory as a forklift certified dude. I think that's very neat. I don't know how many guys we've talked about on this show before that have forklift certification, but we have at least one now, and that's Vinko Bogataj. He's working at this factory, and this is when he's competing as an amateur in not exactly ski jumping. There is a subcategory of competition within ski jumping known as ski flying. And the only difference is it's from way higher up. This was first developed in Yugoslavia in 1934. The first ever ramp Planica that is like rated for ski flying has to be a minimum of 120 meters in the air, which is 400 feet, 120 meters, 400 feet.
400 feet, okay.
From that height, they get jumps that are about 66% further than your average ski jump. The current record for ski jumps, the world record, set by this Austrian dude, Stefan Kraft, 831.7 feet.
That's too much air.
They spend an absurd amount of time in the air. And he's one of the better people in Yugoslavia. That is pretty faint praise. They are not a good national team, but he is good enough at this time to be on the national team for Yugoslavia. He's done a couple of competitions. He got $200 once as a payday for winning. In a couple other ones, he's won a color TV and a stove. So like real
Hey, those are good prizes.
Those
Yeah,
are
I would
great
take
prizes. And I mean, they're probably even better prizes in late 1960s Yugoslavia. But finally, in March of 1970, he goes to the competition that is going to have this viral moment. He is 22 years old now, and he piles into a Fiat Fico after work one day with 3 other buddies, and they drive to Oberstdorf, West Germany. Now, the reason that on March 7th, 1970, that anyone would know about this ski flying competition in Oberstdorf, West Germany, is because there is a very specific television program there. And that television program is ABC's Wide World of Sports. This show had been going on for quite a bit now. This was originally started by the producer Edgar Sherrick in 1956 for a local network, just because they needed to kill time one summer. They just had an open programming block. He's like, all right, we'll run this for 1 year. We'll just go out and find weird sports things, and people will probably like that. And as evidenced by the fact that we, more than 50 years later, still basically try to do that for our own show, he clearly had something to it. Yeah, ABC's Wild World of Sports, very much like I think the three of us tried to do, went out and found things at the periphery. It was taken over by ABC in 1961, hosted a guy named Jim McKay. He is a Philadelphia native who then moved to Baltimore at the age of 14 and got his start in our local networks. But he goes back to Philly for the very first broadcast of the Penn Relays, the kind of variety we're going to see there even in just the first couple of years. Bowling, they actually have a full spin-off for bowling coverage for them. You get High-Lie on here, hurling, and the National Rattlesnake Hunt Championship.
That one's my favorite.
And that one also leads to another spin-off of weird Western sports that people get. So a lot of people were responding to this. It was very popular. And even if you don't know what Jim McKay looks like, you very much know what he sounds like because he was the one that did the classic intro every time.
Spanning the globe to bring you the constant variety of sport, the thrill of victory, and the agony of defeat.
Maybe the most indelible part of the show, not written by Jim Kay, was written by Stanley Ralph Ross, who did occasionally, though not for this project, use the pseudonym Sue, S-U-E, Donem. I have nothing else to say about Stanley Ralph Ross, but I couldn't not include that. Anyway, the intro, talking about victory and defeat, it is the eternal part of the show, and it has been part of why ABC's Wide World of Sports has been so popular. This is its 14th season, and its 10th season on ABC. They're over here in West Germany on this day. They're going to tape it, and then 2 weeks later, broadcast the insanity of ski flying to the masses. And they happen on this day to get maybe the other most indelible thing about this entire show. Let's go back to Vinko for a second. He is at the top of Heine Klopfer Hill here in Oberstdorf. He is preparing for his third and final jump. It has been a rough day for our friend Vinko Bogataj. His very first jump, he crashed on the landing. Not seriously so. He's fine. He's done another jump since then, and his one successful one was 410 feet. But he wasn't doing great at the start of the day, and the weather has gotten progressively worse throughout the day. It's snowing now. It's slick on the ramp. Other people have been falling and crashing. We get now to his third and final jump. He starts going. He very quickly realizes that he is going way too fast. He tries to lower his center of gravity to get into the middle of the floor, maybe stabilize a little bit, gets his hand down for just one moment to brace himself, and then it happens.
The youngster is inexperienced. He fell on his first jump.
A lot of speed in that track. Now, look out! Look at him go! Oh! Oh, baby.
What a terrible fall.
Despite how bad it looks, Bogataj only suffers, like, body-wise, a broken ankle. Like, thinks he feels good enough to get up and go do another race. He actually asks if he can redo his final jump, since technically, I mean, he didn't leave the ramp for a jump. He just kind of went off the side of the ramp.
Technicalities.
They do take him to the hospital where it's revealed he also has a concussion. It's because he was only wearing a knit cap on his head, because that was, like, the normal safety protocol at this time for ski flying.
Eastern Europeans, man.
The whole sport was wild. Goes back to skiing like the next season while still working at the chain factory during the day. He gets like some teasing from coworkers and family, but for Vinko Bogataj, pretty much like forgotten about at home. Never really competes at a super high international level again. Just kind of fades into anonymity for a little bit. That being said, you know how like when someone has a really funny fall and there's that pause for a second while everyone just kind of waits for any indication that they're good?
Yeah.
Of course.
As soon as everyone realized Vinko Bogataj is good, the ABC producers like, we have something on our hands here. Like that was such a just beautiful crash for them. It was everything they needed. They knew they had a hit on their hands. Up to this point, the Wide World of Sports theme had just been like weird, staged kind of stock footage motions of athletes or actors pretending to be athletes. It wasn't any actual clips. But finally, one single producer just figured, hey, why don't we take any of the clips that we have from all of the live sports that we get to broadcast and have access to for free now because they're on our channel. And when they redo that theme song, The Thrill of Victory, it would normally include a picture of someone that had won a championship in the most recent year or so. And then when they said the agony of defeat, for the rest of the television show's run, it was Vinko Bogataj crashing.
That's pretty funny.
So it was like this show came on every Saturday. It was viewed by millions of people, and other clips in this theme changed. When they start using his clip, it is in every single episode for the rest of the history of ABC's Wide World of Sports. To the point where there is this guy, Rich Hall. He had an HBO show, not necessarily the news. He would make up little turns of phrase and stuff. And he made one called agonosis, which he defined as the syndrome of tuning in on Wide World of Sports every weekend just to watch the skier rack himself. This is when you think about some modern virality examples like Kyle Craven or Lena Morris or Tartar Sauce. Those are in order: Bad Luck Brian, Overly Attached Girlfriend, and Grumpy Cat.
I'm glad that you did that because I had no idea the names.
Those are their names. That is the names of those three individuals. Not that it ever matters, because for the rest of their lives, they've lost control of what their image represents. Even if you want to get like more sporting, the first one that came to mind that I looked up, Roxanne Chalafu, she's the sad Nova Piccolo girl. There were people that were considering the problem that these folks would run into later in life, even at the time of Vinko Bogataj. A different producer, Jim Spence, at one point was like, maybe we were being exploitative week after week, showing this guy. When he brings this up to the producers, he's shouted down by a crowd of boos. Everyone tells him to shut up. I think it's okay in this case. I want to make that clear, because in the end, this one is more of a case of celebration rather than any malicious exploitation. What really well illustrates as we get to 1981, Vinko gets invited by ABC to come visit the US for the first time ever. He's still working at the factory at this point, back in Yugoslavia, which is still in 1981 Yugoslavia. He gets invited to Radio City Music Hall, April 25th, 1981. It's the 20th anniversary celebration of ABC's Wide World of Sports. And he gets introduced by Jim McKay at one point. Do you know this man? Probably not. He doesn't even own a credit card. No one knows him from that, but then they start playing a clip of him up on the screen, and the audience loses their fucking minds. Like, Vinko Bogataj is told to stand up. He gets, by a wide margin, the loudest standing ovation, and a night where people are like, Peggy Fleming is there, Joe Frazier is there. This is 1981, and the 1980 U.S. men's hockey team is there. all of them are in awe of Vinko Bogataj. The first person to get Vinko Bogataj's autograph on this evening, Muhammad Ali, comes up and personally asks him for it after the standing ovation. So it's amazing. Like, it's out of nowhere one of the highlights of this dude's life. It's this thing that he's completely put out of his mind because he's never really given a second thought to this injury. He even says, like, at the time, why is this interesting to people? To us as jumpers, we were used to problems like this. We were falling. Nowadays, I do understand why. I understand a lot of the encouragement comes from, how the hell did you do it? You did it and survived. While there's a lot of questions you can ask about memes and stuff and how they do kind of, there are these terms in art history that are kind of linked, hyperrealism and skeuomorphism, and it's basically the idea of an image coming to overshadow what it represents. But I think in this case, Vinko Bogataj comes out pretty clean. I will clarify, there's a couple times in Agony of Defeat where they try to, like, not make as much of a big deal as him, and they'll have a second clip up at the same time during the theme song, but all the way through the end of ABC's Wild World of Sports, which is 1998, 37 total years for that show.
Damn, that's a long time.
Yeah, 28 of those years, every single episode started with Vinko Bogataj. In fact, the only person that is featured on the show more is host Jim McKay, who did appear on, as far as I can tell, every single episode. Vinko outside of the US doesn't really get any celebrity at any point. Does retire, does coach for a while. He does have a star pupil, Franci Pellic, who wins the world championship in 1991 in ski flying, but he just kept working at the factory for 20 more years and then moved into commercial truck driving while developing some other passions that don't involve him crashing and nearly dying, mostly landscape watercolor painting. This has been his big thing. In fact, he gets him another invite to the US in 2007 to exhibit some paintings in the city of Pittsburgh, where he gets to then throw out the first pitch for the Pittsburgh Pirates. And I bet a lot of people were very confused when they saw the name of the first pitch guy, and I like to picture it very similar to the Radio City Music Hall, where then when he comes up to pitch, they show the video. All I know is it is reported that he did get a standing ovation once again. So there had to be something like that. It's not as though people recognize the name Vinko Bogataj.
What a weird place to get invited to.
It was a little strange. I don't know why, like, Pittsburgh of all art scenes decided that Vinko Bogataj's watercolor landscapes of now Slovenia had to be shown off. One last goofy thing about his relationship with ABC. Earlier in the 90s, they had come to have another interview with him. This is like near the 30th anniversary of the show. Now, they basically, anytime there's a big anniversary of the jump, he gets one of those Google Trends spikes where everyone just kind of remembers, oh yeah, Vinko Bogataj. This particular time, he got into a car crash on the way to his interview and complained to ABC, every time I'm on ABC, I crash. In the digital age now, control of your image and like your very self can be very fleeting beyond just memes and like social media and TikTok, and there's surveillance everywhere. But even before this, Vinko Bogataj proved that virality has been a tendency that I think we as humans want to get into because it's a way that we can communicate and relate and have a common understanding of any kind of culture, but in this case, sport with one another. It has kind of become bigger than him. His daughter Monica at one point travels in the US for like 6 weeks in 1998. And again, no one knows her dad by name, but she can tell everyone in the US, oh, well, he was the guy that crashed in ABC's Wild World of Sports. And immediately everyone now knows that she is the daughter of the Agony of Defeat guy. One crash might have also crushed U.S. skiing. The one group of people that does not like Vinko Bogataj is U.S. Ski Federation. They think showing this clip all the time made people not want to ski jump anymore. And to their credit, ski jump participation has plummeted in the decades since. But just about everyone else can agree, I think this is the defining moment of this guy's career, and he didn't even know it at the time when it happened. He didn't even realize how viral he became until years later. And I love the story of Vinko Bogataj, and I'm glad to have shared him with you all today. That is my viral guy.
Well, that was wonderful. I wish he made more money off of the thing that made him viral.
Yeah, that's a thing where I feel like a lot of people these days are able to capitalize financially on like their viral moment, even if it's just for like a short time. Like, hey, let me sell some t-shirts and, rake in some dough. But no, I mean, fascinating to learn about Vinko, who... I mean, realistically, I'm sure there were other national sports broadcasts before ABC's Wide World of Sports, but like that's the one that like I think helps to elevate sports from like a thing that happens and like people go to the games to like being part of the national conversation and national consciousness. So without having that great viral clip to sink its teeth into in the intro to hook the viewers to come back every week, who's to say if we're even here recording this podcast, maybe we would have, other interests like maybe productive with our time as opposed to sports. But we love sports. We love guys. That's why we do this.
We love the mission of that show to expand what the world of sport meant, and we love one of the conductors on that train, even if he is probably, due to his crash history, not someone that should be driving a train. Vinko Bogataj, that's guy number 1. Who has got guy number 2 for us today?
Yeah, so James taking like to not the origins of virality, but the early days, certainly before the internet was around to aid in the virality. I'm going with a guy who certainly only exists in the internet world, but even without the internet, this is a guy that is helping to shape the future of America, is doing great things from that perspective, and helped to produce a clip that about 2 years ago, I think anybody who is on social media, even if you're not into sports, this is one of those kind of feel-good clips that transcended just sports, spoke to kind of the human consciousness, the very root of virality and memes that you spoke about, James. I'm talking about a guy that hit one of the biggest shots in the history of basketball, a full court shot that gave her third grade class free hot chocolate for the day. This went viral. Everybody loved it. I'm talking about everybody's favorite third grade teacher and fifth grade boys basketball coach, Kathleen Fitzpatrick, but she would rather you call her just simply Fitz.
I have no idea where this is going. I couldn't be more excited. Please tell me more about Fitz.
So you've not seen the clip?
I've seen the clip, but like I don't know anything beyond this teacher made a badass shot.
Okay, well, Fitz has a thorough history with the game of basketball. From the day she was born to ball. Let's just make it very simple. She's born to Ellen and Bill Fitzpatrick. Some of her brothers played basketball, but we really want to focus on Ellen's career. Ellen, maiden name Shields, is one of the greatest basketball players in the history of the city of Philadelphia. She attended West Catholic, where she spent her 4 years playing high school ball. And then if you're a Catholic basketball player in Philadelphia in the 80s, you're going to one of two places. You're hoping to go to Villanova or St. Joe's. She's going to choose to stay in Philadelphia, go to West Philly, join the St. Joe's Hawks. And Ellen Fitzpatrick is one of the greatest players in St. Joe's women's history. She's a 2-time captain for the Hawks. She is the all-time program leader in three-point percentage at 40.4%. So very clear already where she's getting it. It's in the family. Ellen, not just a shooter though, she's also 7th all-time in assists at St. Joe's with 355. She would be elected 2 times to the first team All A10. And in 88-89, she set the program record for free throw percentage in a season with a nice even 89%. In 97, she was voted into the St. Joe's and Big Five Halls of Fame. So if you're a person in Philly and you know ball, you know Ellen Fitzpatrick is one of the best to ever do it in our fine city. Fitz herself, getting back to Kathleen, but again, she prefers to be called by Fitz, so that's how we're going to refer to her on this podcast. Did not go to West Catholic like her mother. She attended the Academy of Notre Dame, the Namer, which I hope I said correct. I probably didn't. It's an independent Catholic school in Radnor, PA. So by some definitions, people may consider that still in the Philadelphia city limits. Others may not. Nonetheless, a local girl nonetheless. While at the Academy of Notre Dame, she set the program record for three-pointers made. She made 245 throughout her high school career. She finished 4th in all-time scoring at Notre Dame with 1,329 points. Her senior year, she led the team to the state semifinals where they were knocked off, couldn't quite make it all the way. But for her efforts senior year, she was named first team all-conference, all-mainline, and all-Delco. 3 great first teams for somebody to be making. And she is going to now choose to follow in her mother's footsteps. She gets a scholarship offer to go to St. Joe's, where she's going to start her college career. Fun note, one of her teammates while at St. Joe's is one of the biggest dogs in the W right now. And 2019, I believe, WNBA champion with the Washington Mystics, Natasha Cloud.
Natasha Cloud. See, I thought I was trying to think, because I know Copper is a recent Philly grad, but I didn't know what part of Philly she was coming from. But Natasha Cloud also, that's sick.
Yes, yeah, Natasha Cloud. So they form a nice backcourt duo there for the Hawks. As a true freshman, she's going to appear in 19 games. She's only going to average about 5 minutes a game. Not really seeing much playing time, but when she does, she's doing well. She's lighting it up from 3, as she knows how to do. Her best game would be November 23rd against Liberty. In 18 minutes, she drops 14 on 6 of 8 from the floor, 2 of 3 from 3, throwing an assist, a block, and a steal along the way. So a very impressive game that shows what her kind of potential could be. Going forward into the sophomore year, she's now going to earn a starting spot. She appears in 28 games with 24 starts. She leads the team in three-point makes at 53, but it's the free throw percentage that we really love to see. At 90.6%, this eclipses her mother's record that she held for a single season for the St. Joe's Hawks. There were other Hawks that also beat that record.
Okay.
Fifth best in St. Joe's history.
But that's still bragging rights at home.
It's bragging rights at home, and I just really, I would never drop it personally. Like her mom, to be clear, does have the better career overall at St. Joe's, but you always have that one thing. You know, what I've always famously said about basketball is you can watch the game or you can look at the numbers, and the numbers say Fitz got her mama beat. But no, Fitz, with that mark, 90.6%, it would be the 5th best in program history. Still is to this day. Set a career high with 25 points and added 4 steals, 4 rebounds, and 3 assists in a win at Rhode Island. She also dropped 20 with 2 assists and 2 steals against a SUNY school, it looks like. CSUN. Let's figure out what CSUN is. I just copied the abbreviation. Oh, excuse me. That is Cal State Northridge.
I was gonna say I could not think of a single SUNY school. That is the
Significantly
other side of the country.
different.
The very opposite side of the country. But against Cal State University North Side, she dropped 20. So she has some good games. In a West Philly showdown, she drops 18, including 6 of 10 from 3 against Drexel. Notably, she's also voted the team's most improved player. So teammates recognizing the work that Fitz is putting in. All teammates, to a T, love her. Anybody that comes across her, she's just a great presence to have in the locker room. And they acknowledge that with the most improved.
And I think by the time you get to college, most improved no longer feels like an insult the way that it does in like Little League and stuff. Like now you all are at a pretty competent baseline, so most improved is actually praise.
Right, yeah, like the Little League most improved is like, tell you what, he struck out every game until the last game of the season, and he had 2 foul balls in that one. Most improved. But no, it's no token award here for Fitz. Coming back for her junior year, she's not going to get as many starts. She's still going to start 18 of the 29 games she appears in. But it's something about Rhode Island that she just really fucking hates for some reason. Sets another career high, dropping 26, including 8 3-pointers against the Rams. And again, she's going to lead the team in 3-pointers made with 57. Her free throw percentage does lead the team, but it drops to 83.3% this year. And going into her senior year, she's starting to think more about her future, her next steps after the basketball career is done. And she knows she's going to have a great opportunity if she's able to transfer to Rutgers for 2 reasons. First of all, better teaching program there. And second of all, you're going to get a chance to learn from one of the greatest teachers in the history of college basketball, C. Vivian Strainer. So she transfers to Rutgers. She sits out a year because of the transfer rules at the time. But when she comes back for now her 5th year, she is going to start 19 games across 31 that she appears in. Much more modest season statistically. Obviously, a bit of a step up in competition going from the A-10 to the Big Ten. She'd score a season-high 9 points against Wisconsin in a February matchup. She went 3 of 5 from the 3-point line. But Her time here is a lot less about what she did on the court and more so the relationship that she formed with C. Vivian Strainer. She said of going to Rutgers, playing at Rutgers for a Hall of Fame coach was unreal. I learned so much on and off the court. And she said, I learned so much from really one of the best to ever do it. She loved her time so much that she wants to stick around on the bench for one more year. So Coach Strainer agrees to bring Fitz back as a graduate assistant for her first year after leaving Rutgers. So that's for the 18-19 season. She's a graduate assistant. And then a year later, she's going to land her first job as a teacher at Holy Trinity School in Georgetown, so down in the DC area. Notably, she accepts this job in August of 2020, which you may remember is in the throes of the COVID-19 pandemic when all kinds of crazy shit was going on with schools and just a very scary time for anybody that worked in public education to be in that job. But as she did as a captain for the St. Joe's Hawks, and as she did as a graduate assistant, she's going to step up to the plate. Fitz is going to do as best she can to help guide the youth. As I mentioned earlier, she's also the 5th grade basketball coach for the boys team. So still staying closely involved with the game, but the way she most stays involved with playing the game is at recess. You know, she's always playing basketball with the kids. The kids are amazed at how good Miss Fitz is. And that, of course, sets the scene for the moment that brings us here, the viral moment. It's December 2021, so it's year 2. It's a cold winter afternoon. Miss Fitz has been particularly tough on the class recently. On the most recent Friday, she scheduled 2 tests. She's been asking a lot of them. So she makes a deal with them at recess. She says, if I make this full court shot, hot chocolate for everybody. She says she makes these kind of like fun little side bets frequently, but this was just the first time that the cameras happened to be rolling. It's actually her mother was filming it because mom is one of the assistant coaches on that boys basketball team. So
sick.
A whole family affair. Mom's got the camera out and Fitz is pulling up from full court. Obviously, we've seen the shot. It's nothing but net. It's not even one of those like, they still count for the same amount of points, but I always find it dissatisfying when a full court heave that goes in hits the backboard and goes in.
Yeah.
That feels like luckier to me. Like nothing but net. You were aiming for the net and it went straight in. Like,
and involves absolutely no luck.
Involves zero luck. You don't need to worry about it bouncing off the back right. It just goes straight in. Pure skill, pure hooper, pure Fitz. In an interview with CNN afterwards, she said, I think it was a tie between who was more excited. And what I learned watching this interview too, she has such a thick Philadelphia accent. It is lovely. It's perfect. Learning that this was fully not just through her basketball career, but like, this is a Philadelphian. This is a Philly girl. Really made the moment go up in my rankings. She said, I think it was a tie between who was more excited. I knew it was going to go in. But at the same time, I was hoping and praying because I promised them hot chocolate, so it had to go in. As I mentioned, she felt bad that she'd given them the 2 tests on the Friday. They had a lot of work to finish before the holiday break that was coming up, so she really wanted to sink the shot and do something nice for them. And she was like blissfully unaware of like how much this had blown up. She said, the kids would come into class in the morning and say, Miss Fitz is going viral, but kids can exaggerate and I only have an Instagram, so I didn't really know. But based on, you know, her one viral moment, as I said, you know, you have a chance to build up a bit of a following now. So she had her Instagram account. She's had that since going back to the St. Joe's days. She also has a TikTok account now where you can see some trick shots that she'll try. The most recent post was from this most recent January 2023. She hits a full court shot while wearing like, you know, like the promotional things at college games, and they have the Dunkin' like coffee cup that they make them wear.
Yeah.
So she's wearing one of those, but it's hot chocolate.
I almost got to steal. So there was an event at the museum, and for some reason, someone in that event had an Everything Bagel mascot costume. And they left this at the museum for like 3 weeks. And finally, it was the day where I was like, you know what? That costume's coming home with me. Not 10 minutes later, a guy came in saying, hey, I think I left an everything bagel costume here. I was like, God damn it, yes you did. Here you go.
You're too good of a worker. I would say you get 5 business days if you leave something at a place of business. After that, all bets are off. But yeah, so Fitz is wearing the hot chocolate outfit, and she made this video with Elena Deladon and a younger, yet to be identified Deladon. I'm not sure if it's a younger cousin, if it's a little sister, if this is her niece. It is just an unidentified younger Deladon that hits a free throw. Elena hits a 3, and then Fitz bounces it in from half court, which I think is way more impressive than actually making it from half court.
So, like, throws it at the ground, bounces it?
Well, so she like lobs it up with an arc, and at first you're watching it, you're like, oh, that's like way fucking short. How's that going to go in? But then it's like a shooting arc, normal arc, bounces, goes back up, tickles the front of the rim, and then goes in. So not a slam bounce, like a shot that arcs up, bounces down.
Almost like skipping a stone. God, she's good.
Very simple. No, exactly. It's incredible how she pulled it off.
So here's a question for you. We're approaching, as I understand it, this will be the end of season 3 for her. Has she gotten any like postseason hardware in the first 2? Do we get any Rookie of the Year votes early on in that first COVID year? And are we expecting to see anything coming her way after this season?
I mean, certainly Teacher of the Year. But just while I'm talking about Deladon, I just want to like throw in something I learned from her. Instagram is public, so I don't consider it creeping. It is for this podcast. She's like very good friends with Elena Deladon. Like posts of them like goofing off at like a vacation home together. Like,
did that happen like while she was at Georgetown, or is this exclusively because of the video?
Well, so it goes back to before the video. It's not
That's
like
what I'm saying. I'm trying to think when they would have overlapped, and I guess Georgetown and the Mystics is the only time I can think of.
Right. Yeah. So this was the women's basketball community, especially in the greater Philadelphia area.
Just as you said, Natasha Cloud actually would make perfect sense as a link between these two. You've already given us a perfect explanation.
Right. Yeah. So like very good friends with Natasha, gets close with the team after that. But so you can follow Fitz on Instagram at Kathy Does, KATHYDOES, or on TikTok, Miss Fitz Does, MSFITZDOES. But yeah, like going back a solid year or 2 before the shot even went in, hanging out with the Deladons, hanging out with Natasha, posted a picture with Natasha after they won that championship, and Natasha commented, "We did it." So definitely considered it an accomplishment for both of them going back to their St. Joe's Hawks days, which just speaks to the quality of teammate that Fitz is, and hopefully would also be an example of the kind of teacher that she is. Haven't had the pleasure of taking any of her classes, but certainly if all the publicly available knowledge that we have.
I'm sorry I haven't gone back to elementary school.
I've always wanted to do like a Billy Madison thing. It would be very fun.
Well, you could speed run it so well. Now, like, that's the thing. It is a bummer that we can't go back now that we know like all the glitches.
It would be fun to do the Billy Madison thing, but as I said, by all publicly available information, seems to be a phenomenal person to be teaching the youth. Posted photos supporting Black Lives Matter during 2020. Like, we're big Fitz fans. But to end this, I think the best thing I can say to speak to the quality of guy that Fitz is what she had to say about the viral shot. So when she posted it on Instagram, and to be clear, this is after it's blown up, her first public acknowledgement, basically, of that this is happening. She says, "It has been unbelievable to bring so much joy and laughter around the world, especially keeping positive vibes within our school. It's been a really tough journey as a teacher the last few years, but these kids make it all worth it. And maybe next time I can promise to cancel a week of homework."
Just Fitz, but Just Fitz certainly isn't a insubstantial story. That was great. I had no idea we were going to have like a full basketball dynasty too, going back to the mom.
Yeah, it's the whole family, and I loved learning, and I was like, wait, this is like Elena Deladon's best friend. Why isn't that like a known thing about this? You know what I mean? Like, best friends with Elena Deladon, best friends with Natasha Cloud. Mom is one of the greatest hoopers in Philly history.
But, hey mom, You know who has a higher peak free throw percentage? Yeah, that's right. That's me. That's Fitz.
But we do have one more fine viral guy to learn about. And I'm hoping you're not going to talk about Rudy Gobert because that's the wrong kind of viral, Xavier. That's not what we were looking for.
I'm not going to talk about Rudy Gobert.
Though happy recent third Rudy Gobert day.
To all who celebrate.
And also happy breaking news, Michael Jordan trying to sell the Charlotte Hornets.
Maybe I was onto something. Maybe he really didn't like signing $5 million checks for PJ Washington.
Certainly possible. I mean, he'll get at least $1 billion for it, so I'm sure he can. Yeah, he'll have plenty of money to go smoke cigars and gamble. It's fine.
All I'm saying is this means it's a non-zero chance that Michael Jordan listens to this show.
So, but both of you, fantastic stories about people who went viral. Neither of them really saw monetary gain from their virality. The person I want to talk about was someone who built an entire career off of going viral on the internet. I want to talk to you both about Kevin Ferguson. So, Kevin Ferguson, born in Nassau in the Bahamas on February 8th, 1974. As a child, his family moved to the U.S. and he grew up in the Miami area. He was a star middle linebacker at Miami Palmetto High, a school that's produced such alumni as Tim Hardaway Jr., Camila Cabello, Supreme Court Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson, and Jeff Bezos.
Mixed bag, I think we can safely say.
An interesting group of alumni there. But then Hurricane Andrew blew through South Florida, and it destroyed his house. Not only did it destroy his family's house, it shortened the season for Palmetto High, and didn't really have a chance to show out during the time where he would be getting scholarship offers. Instead, he tries walking on to Bethune-Cookman, flunks out, and by 1994, he's living essentially on the street. He had a green 1987 Pathfinder with 4 mismatched tires, taped plastic bags to the shattered windows to keep rain out, and he bathed in the ocean and just went to the bathroom wherever he could find it. Needing a way out, he starts working as a bouncer at a strip club. Soon after, a friend from high school, nicknamed Icy Mike, which is probably the whitest name I could think of for a Miami wannabe gangster / club goer type person.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but Mike White went to the Dolphins this offseason, did he not?
Mike White did go to the Dolphins.
I sincerely hope that someone knows how to capitalize on Icy Mike White.
So, Icy Mike offers Ferguson a job as a limo driver / bodyguard for his company, RK Net Media. Listeners may know this company by its business name, Reality Kings.
Yeah, it's just like it was like The Bachelor, Real World, right? That's what they're the kings of, right?
So, Icy Mike discovers the skills that Ferguson would later become known for quite by accident. Every time a guy maybe got a little handsy with some girls in a VIP room, they ended up with Ferguson standing over them. And he realized he was pretty good at beating people up. So in 2003, he started competing in unsanctioned mutual combat street fights. These fights started getting taped and were distributed through the internet, mostly on adult websites and other sites such as MySpace, RealFights.com, and ComeGetYouSome.com. In the early to mid-2000s, these sites were getting tens of thousands of visitors just to watch these fights. In his first taped fight, he fought a man named Big D, who had been causing trouble in a Miami neighborhood. During the fight, Ferguson opened up a massive gash over Big D's right eye. Ferguson knocked him out and earned $3,000. The fight was put on a porn website and got 2 million hits very soon. Commentators gave him a new nickname, Slice. We are talking about Kimbo Slice!
You have been edging us on that name reveal for like 2 minutes, you bastard.
I gotta say, I did recognize the name, but I wanted to give Xavier, and Xavier, you expertly.
You know what? I appreciate you letting me have that, Diaz, because I really was hoping that no one would get that. But yes, we're talking about Kimbo Slice. It's important to note that despite the nature of what I'm about to talk about, Ferguson never ran into any legal trouble for violent acts. He was not a violent person. He just really liked to fight and was good at it. ESPN expose described the fights that Kimbo took part in as mano a mano. Kimbo fought to test himself and to make money. It was human cockfighting. The brawls drew crowds and bets, and Kimbo put as much as $5,000 for any taker who could match his stake and beat him. Surrounding neighborhoods merely brought their baddest and bravest to fight, organized by what Kimbo called the Don Kings of the Street. These fights get posted on YouTube. Rules were simple: pure striking, no grappling, officiated by the masses. In about 20 fights, Kimbo lost only once, and we will get into that one loss later. 2005, he started actually training in martial arts to improve his technique, which at that point had literally just been honed through punching and backyard brawls. But he mostly focused on things that are illegal in most actual combat sports, but totally fine in fighting on the street. A Rolling Stone article in June of 2006 called him, quote, the king of the web brawlers. And their description of him is fantastic. Quote, right now, the undisputed online king of the underground bare-knuckle world is a fearsome 30-year-old man who goes by the name of Kimbo. He works in his hometown of Miami as the muscle for an online porn empire that includes the website MILF Hunter.
Shouldn't we be referring to him as the reality king of the web brawlers?
You know what? If they were smarter, they would have done that. Kimbo said, a fight starts by word of mouth. A guy is a badass in his neighborhood, and then people that know people make it happen. It's bragging rights. It's just fantastic. These videos are all so good. I'm going to talk about a couple of my favorites later. But at this point, Kimbo's lone ever defeat was to a guy named Sean the Cannon Gannon, who was a 265-pound Boston police officer. Actual on-duty police officer.
There was the question I was about to ask. Okay.
Yeah. And he got in trouble for that one, and Kimbo really wanted to fight him again. He said, I wish we could get in contact with Gannon's ass and set that up again. The police overall usually ignore these types of things when it's two, consenting adults beating the crap out of each other. But they weren't really willing to ignore their own cop getting into it, so the Boston PD essentially benched Gannon and would not let him fight anymore. He did actually sign to some MMA groups later on and had a couple fights, but they never got that rematch. But I would highly recommend watching the video of it. It's so good in that they're just trading haymakers in a little gym surrounded by 30 people, friends of each of them. By the end of the fight, they're both so exhausted, they're barely moving and just collapsed against each other on the wall.
So if Gannon got in cop trouble, at least, if not real trouble, has to this point anything happened for Kimbo legally for the fighting? As we reach this, he hasn't run into anything.
As I said earlier, Kimbo never gets in any legal trouble for anything violent. The only time he's ever had any sort of legal trouble in his life was before this started. He got a concealed weapons charge that was later dismissed. So he's, for a guy who made his career beating people up in street fights, very clean individual, which I wanted to make sure of that, because you can never be certain with combat sports athletes, especially one of this type. By 2007, Slice's fights had over 100 million views on YouTube alone, which is ridiculous for 2007 YouTube. After watching his videos, Lamar Odom once said, quote, Manny Ramirez was born to swing a bat, Peyton Manning was born to throw a football, and Kimbo Slice was born to kick ass. Which I could just picture Lamar Odom saying, and it makes me very happy.
Lamar Odom listing Kimbo Slice, Manny Ramirez, Peyton Manning all at the same time. That's an incredible snapshot of history.
I at the time, because as a huge boxing fan, it drove me nuts because that was truly it was oh, who's the best heavyweight fighter in the world? It's Kimbo Slice. I was Xavier will get to it.
We will get into this
professional career, but that was the power of his clips. This guy who's never even fought in a professional ring is yeah, I would take him against anybody in the world. He would kick their ass.
Because it's fighting that makes sense to people. It's a universal level of fighting. It's a fighting we can look at it without any additional knowledge other than just our animal instincts. And that's probably how I'd punch someone if I was strong enough to do that.
We will get into this very soon. Early 2007, Slice signed on to make his official MMA debut against former WBO heavyweight champion and Olympic gold medalist boxer Ray Mercer at the Cage Fury Fighting Championships 5 in Atlantic City. He gets trained by retired MMA fighter Boss Rutan and boxing instructor Randy Katami at Elite MMA in Thousand Oaks, California. The match was scheduled as a 3-round exhibition with like professional MMA rules. And, despite mostly being known for boxing, Mercer did not take Kimbo Slice seriously. The quality of guys he is fighting, they're bums. I'm a former heavyweight champion of the world. Slice knocked out Mercer with a guillotine choke in 72 seconds of that fight.
Shit, okay.
After this, everyone's like, oh wow, okay, maybe he can do something. So on October 11th, 2007, Pro Elite announced that they'd signed Slice to a deal, and he'd make his debut on November 10th, 2007 in the Elite XC bout against Bo Cantrell. Cantrell also didn't put much stock into this upcoming fight. Quote, I've been fighting for 5 years. Tough cats. I don't make a living beating up little kids on YouTube. There's a big difference between being hit by someone who's trained to fight and someone off the street thinking they're tough. People pay me, train me well. I throw combinations, kicks, roundhouses. I'm not some guy trying to do his best Chuck Norris impersonation. Slice defeated Cantrell 19 seconds into the first round by submission due to punches.
Does he, by this point, have moves other than just a flurry of punches?
No. Kimbo Slice never really... They realize that they can't train him on ground game at his age and how he's grown up fighting. So, the focus for him is just making sure that when he's fighting, he's not leaving himself wide open and he can defend a little bit and won't get gassed in an actual fight. But he's still just... His thing is punching people. Next fight. February 16, 2008, Slice fights Tank Abbott in the main event at Elite XC Street Certified. And you'd think he would learn by this point, but Abbott says before the fight, it's going to be an easy beating. I can't wait to hurt him. I've been in over 200 fights. I bench press 600 pounds. He doesn't have the skills to hang. Kimbo beats Abbott in 43 seconds, and it only takes that long because he knocks him to his knees and then watches and lets him get up again to knock him down a second time. He could have finished him in literal seconds, but was just toying with him and let him get back up.
Will someone please take this large, violent man seriously?
Someone will eventually. On May 31st, 2008, Slice fights in the main event of the first ever mixed martial arts event shown on primetime network television, which was aptly called Elite XC Primetime.
One footnote I want to say about this. If I remember correctly, I believe that fighting on the undercard of that event was Herschel Walker.
No fucking way.
I swear to you.
It's possible.
Herschel Walker had an MMA career, and I remember watching one of his fights, and I'm trying to think why I would have, and I think it was because it was on the undercard of this Kimbo Slice.
Not on this fight. The undercard is mostly nobodies. Gina Carano was on the main card of this fight.
Gina Carano!
A young Gina Carano at this point. Yeah, no Herschel Walker.
Only one popular, Breitbart? Is that what Ben Shapiro runs? Only one of their figures today.
Again, this is the first ever primetime televised MMA fight, and it's, a ratings hit. Most watched bout in MMA history at the time. He fights James Thompson, who is winning on points after the first 2 rounds. But in the third round, opening seconds, Slice throws a haymaker to his left ear, ruptured his ear, giving what fighters will call cauliflower ear, and then continued to punch him in the face multiple times until the ref had to stop the fight. Another massive knockout for Kimbo Slice. But, as Diaz so aptly said earlier, some other professional fighters are not happy about this. Fellow Elite XC competitor Brett Rogers called his performance garbage. Frank Mir said in an interview that, quote, every time Kimbo Slice fights, it sets mixed martial arts back. Because if you remember our previous episode on the axe murderer Wanderlei Silva, Pride and UFC were the big MMA competitions at this point, and neither had been aired on primetime yet. So their stars were very critical of Kimbo, partly out of jealousy that hey, this guy who is not an actual fighter is getting all of this attention, but also frustration because every time people look at this guy, they think this is what MMA is, which It's not, and I can understand why that's frustrating, but, Kimbo is a draw. People love watching him fight. A couple months later, Kimbo supposed to fight Ken Shamrock in October of 2008. But Shamrock gets injured in warm-ups, and officials scrambled to replace him with Seth Petrozelli the last minute. Petrozelli knocks Kimbo Slice out in 14 seconds of the first round. 2 days later, Petrozelli claims that the Elite XC officials tried to give him extra money to go easy on Slice. He retracted his statement later that day and tried to clarify, saying, the regular bonuses for Fight of the Night and Knockout of the Night and stuff like that they were just explaining that. And Florida state officials even investigated, because they're if they're trying to bribe these state-sanctioned fights, that's big news. They found no evidence of any wrongdoing, but the controversy destroyed Elite XC. And they had to declare bankruptcy by the end of the month.
Damn.
Yeah, it was Kimbo getting knocked out and Petrozelli running his mouth ruined the entire company.
Kimbo getting knocked out was the company getting knocked out.
Yeah, essentially. And, after Elite XC folds, Dana White stated that if Slice wanted to compete in UFC, he would have to win his way on by competing on the Ultimate Fighter TV show, which at this point had 9 seasons. I think all on Spike TV. White went on to say that he might create a show with heavyweights just for Kimbo if he wanted in. And he ends up doing just that. They released the Ultimate Fighter Heavyweights in September 2009. It's actually hilarious because they line up 15 fighters in the initial episode and then bring Kimbo in as the surprise last fighter, despite the show literally being made for him. In his third episode, he loses to eventual champion Roy Nelson. But the show is a ratings hit. Doubles the average viewership of the previous season of The Ultimate Fighter, and on episodes that Kimbo is in, triples it. Despite an MRI showing that, like our good friend Justin Diaz, he has no cartilage in his knee, possibly needing surgery, Kimbo does come back to fight in the finale, which was his official UFC debut. The way The Ultimate Fighter works is it's fighting in smaller groups against each other, and then right at the end, the champion of that gets to fight in an official main event, but they brought Kimbo in too because Kimbo is a ratings draw. In a wild event that featured a young John Bones Jones who got DQ'd for illegally elbow striking someone so many times that he separated the guy's shoulder, and some victories by Frankie Edgar and Matt Mitrione, Kimbo faced off against Houston Alexander. This was expected to be kind of an easy win for Alexander because Kimbo looked very bad in his loss to Roy Nelson during the show. But Kimbo wins in a unanimous decision. People are interesting. Maybe, it wasn't great entertainment, but he did win. We'll let him get one more shot. And then he loses to Matt Mitrione in his next fight. And Dana White's you know what, it's just not worth it this time, so they let him go. He decides he wants to try boxing, and he does go 7-0 over the course of a year and a half. He had one really nice KO in his first fight where he was up against James Wade, where an uppercut, he got Wade right in the chin, immediately fell unconscious and fell through the ropes and was half hanging out of the ring on the ropes, which is always the best kind of knockout.
Taking out the laundry real quick. Taking out the laundry.
Indeed. Doesn't quite make the same scene that his street brawls and MMA fights had done. He tries to make a brief comeback, MMA comeback at age 41, and he fights the then 51-year-old Ken Shamrock in 2015 for Bellator, and he wins by TKO. It sets the Bellator viewing record with 2.4 million households watching it. Still a massive draw, but was widely considered, a farcical event because the 51-year-old Shamrock was extremely out of shape, and it wasn't a fixed fight, but Shamrock was not in any, sort of conditioning to really give a challenge. He then fights fellow native of the Bahamas, Dada 5000, who was also a street fighter in Florida. They had kind of grown up together and had always had a rivalry. Both of them are pretty out of shape at this point. Slice wins when Dada collapses, which was later determined to be the result of cardiac arrest, severe dehydration, and kidney failure.
Is he good?
Surprisingly, yeah.
That was I'm an ABC producer taking a breath to make sure Vinko Bogataj is alive before I say that's hysterical.
It's just funny. It's like, hey, we're gonna have these two guys from the same country who grew up in the same state, in the same area, who were both street fighters, and have them fight each other for our entertainment for millions to watch. And it went as badly as you could possibly expect.
I mean, you do have to give props to working yourself to the point that your kidneys fail. Like, that is some true mind over matter shit.
And you know what? He didn't technically lose, because the result is later overturned for a no contest, because they said that Kimbo had trace amounts of, like, very, very little, like, but enough where they overturned it. And despite this, again, being a fight where both of them were so out of shape that one had to go to the hospital with, like, severe injuries, it again broke Bellator viewing records. So they're like, hey, we're going to bring Kimbo back for another fight. Dada could not fight again. So we're going to have him fight James Thompson again, the guy he cauliflower-eared earlier. And they announced that for July of 2016. Unfortunately, on June 5th, 2016, a month before the fight, Slice gets admitted to a hospital in Margate, Florida, and dies of congestive heart failure a day later, at the age of 42. It's sad. He lived a life of fighting, but was never in the best shape, and it can't be said to be too surprising, but still, at only 42, and after, just having a professional bout just a couple of months earlier, it's, shocking to pretty much everybody involved at the time. Kimbo literally made an entire career just off of viral underground videos posted to Pornhub and YouTube, and it's great that a guy like that, who from all accounts was a really nice guy, no one really had anything bad to ever say about him, but he made a career out of doing this, out of becoming viral on the internet. There's a couple videos that I really love. I already talked about the full fight between Kimbo and Gannon. If you want to see that one, just search Kimbo Slice versus police officer, quote, greatest fight ever. There's another really good one called Kimbo Slice versus Afro Puff in Big Mac. And this is just like a standard brawl on the pavement where these two guys show up. It's one very tall guy with an afro, and then another fairly large individual. And they just decide they want to take Kimbo on one at a time. Kimbo fights Afro Puff first, and Afro Puff is a chicken. He's like, okay, he gets hit once, and he's like, I don't want to fight anymore. And all the guys there are clowning on him for being a coward. And then so Big Mac steps in, and he's just ready to throw. And Kimbo knocks him to the ground 3 different times, but he keeps getting back up. And everyone's like, you know what? You're pretty cool. But Kimbo does eventually knock him out, streaming blood down his face. Kimbo really didn't have to work up much of a sweat. But it's just like the epitome of the type of brawling that made him famous.
Brawling is a good word.
It's not really fighting.
Even then, because like a famous trope in boxing commentary is he's fighting out there, he needs to get back to boxing. Kimbo takes it a step even further than he's brawling out there, he needs to get back to fighting.
Fights don't break out at the brawl for him. It just stays a brawl the whole time.
Diaz and I both love watching boxing. There's something about just watching 2 consenting adult men wanting to just fight any way they can. The only way this stops is if someone gets the shit beaten out of them. And there's just something, I think there's like a rawness to that people love. And that's why Kimbo was so popular. I don't think you'll really see anything like that again with, how manicured a lot of stuff on the internet is now. Like, obviously there's still bad stuff you can find on the internet, but I can't imagine anyone coming up like Kimbo at this point. I feel like it was a time and a place thing, and just the level of internet fame brought him to a place that you couldn't get to now.
Well, I think a big part of it too, I don't know how it was for both of you, but attending a public school in middle of fucking nowhere, Pennsylvania, the most entertaining things that we came up with was like, yo, did you hear so-and-so and such are going to fight after school? And we'd go watch. And Kimbo was like the Tom Brady of that. You can go play pickup football with your friends after school. You can go watch the fights. Or we can watch Tom Brady on Sunday, or we can type in Kimbo Slice on YouTube and watch this guy absolutely wreck some people's fucking lives.
We've talked at length about universality, and there is something universal about fighting. And I mean, now it is time for us to fight as the guy Bunel dons that different hat, and we get ready to discuss these three. What are our early feelings here?
I have to say, I really loved talking about Kimbo Slice. It feels like the perfect reflection of early internet virality, especially like early YouTube.
I think that's very valid. I acknowledge that was something like I very intentionally wanted to eschew. I wanted to find an earlier example of virality there, but if we want to like focus in on YouTube virality and internet virality, I'll cede the competition in that case to either of these two, and in particular, I think Kimbo Slice.
One other thing I wanted to say about Kimbo real quick is Kimbo's children, remember, his name is Kevin Ferguson. They were Kevin Ferguson Jr., Kevin Ferguson II, Kevlar Ferguson, Cassandra Ferguson with a K, Kiara Ferguson with a K, and Kavina Ferguson with a K. And his grandchildren are Kevin III and Kimbo Legacy.
I was going to say that we should have just stopped at Kevlar because we peaked with Kevlar Ferguson, but then you got Kimbo Legacy at the end.
I just on the spot have devised a test to ascertain the guyness of each of our candidates. And it's, can they be the first result of a Google search that I type in saying the guy that this? For example, because I forgot the name of
Vinko Bogataj?
I forgot Vinko Bogataj's name.
It's not an easy name.
I put into Google, I said the agony of defeat guy, and his name came up, and I was like, oh yeah, that's him.
Yeah.
So that worked. For Kimbo, I typed in the guy who went viral street fighting on YouTube.
The YouTube Street Fighter guy, yeah.
He did come up, and then I typed in the guy who had a shot for hot chocolate for the class, and Kathleen Fitzpatrick came up. So I want to say this test works great.
They are all viral. This is a check. It has not done anything to help us decide.
The shortest of those that I had to type, this was the point I was building up to, was the agony of defeat guy. Does that succinctness lend to, again, Vinko's case?
That is what I want to focus in on, but it wasn't necessarily the succinctness. The most universal experience in sports is the agony of defeat. Everybody has experienced the agony of defeat. Not everybody has experienced the thrill of victory, but every single athlete, team, organization, fan has felt the agony of defeat. And for millions of people, going back to how this changes the vernacular of it, the phrase agony of defeat, first off, that phrase itself is now present in the discussion of sport, and it has, I think, one visual indicator, which is the crashing form of one Vinko Bogataj.
See, when you talked about what you wanted this topic to be, and I was struggling to find something that fit, and I talked to Caitlin, because you said, what is in the public conscious?
Mm-hmm.
And Caitlin knows who Kimbo Slice is. I don't think Caitlin would know who anyone else on this is, and Caitlin has zero knowledge of any sort of sport, and that's why I was thinking, like, who is someone that, like, random people who have no interest in, like, sports or anything like that would know because they went viral somehow. And that's where I think Kimbo is is the best option here, because he was what everybody talked about at school, on the news, just like around the water cooler with people at work. You see that fight? You see that video on YouTube? It wasn't just one instance. It was a sustained couple of years of just like everyone wanting to see Kimbo beat somebody else up.
Sure, name recognition, no question. If again, we're going by like different categories here under the heading of virality. Name recognition, he's gonna wax Fitz too. Like that's Kimbo by a country mile. We're talking a couple years. Again, 28 years of every Saturday afternoon broadcast with this one guy in the theme song, as everyone else in the theme song changes around him. If I lose to Kimbo Slice 2-1, I'm fine on that. I do want to keep trying to make my last-ditch attempt here for Vinko Bogataj.
I totally get that. I think the reason it's not resonating with me is because I don't think I ever watched The Wide World of Sports. So I could not remember that clip that you like. I remember Miss Fitz hitting that shot. I do remember that. I did not remember ever seeing that. So I feel like it doesn't sit in my head as a viral moment. But maybe I'm biased because of that. So I'd like to hear what Diaz thinks about this.
Absolutely.
Well, so it's tough for me because I do love both of these guys. The thing that, like, I would say if I wanted to vote for Vinko, I would say the fact that he comes to America for the first time and, like, all these years later after the actual event still gets a standing ovation. And it's like his kind of like 15 minutes in the sun occurs so long after. Like, his 15 minutes is 15 years after he crashed. It's truly absurd. But, like, the thesis statement that Xavier gave to kind of lead off this debate of what does it mean to be viral, and especially in the early internet when, virality was still somewhat of a new concept, and who captures that essence, I do come back to Kimbo. And like, if we're doing a ballot, I'm still putting Fitz first, but I see the way that the guy Bunel's leaning, and if we are between those two, I think I would have to go Kimbo.
I made one note about Fitz that I do want to share. And I want to make it clear that this is not a knock on Fitz at all. She sounds absolutely lovely. She sounds like an excellent teacher. Totally great guy. Loved hearing about her. When I found out that the shot to get everyone hot chocolate was a self-imposed thing, it does feel a little bit like when corporations will make a partnership with a baseball team. We're like, oh yeah, for every save the team gets, we'll donate $75 to the hospital. It's like, you could also just donate a bunch of money to the hospital. Like, the person that said, oh man, for the 2021 Orioles, for every save the Orioles get, we'll go ahead and do it. I was like, oh, I see you hedging your bets there. Okay.
Well, it's like the NBA, I think, immediately in the second year of this new All-Star format realized what they had to do. But I remember the first year, it was like, all right, each quarter that a team's win, $25,000 goes to charity. So I'm like, damn, so like there's kids that are going to come in here and think they're going to get all this money, and just LeBron's fucking wrecking their hopes and dreams.
So yeah, that's the one note I wanted to share about Fitz. I can feel my grasp on a chance here slipping away. I'm going to make my final last-ditch effort, which is just kind of a distinction there on name recognition, because I don't think anyone would know the name Vinko Bogataj if you ask them on the street. And that's kind of the point, because going back to Kyle Craven and Lena Morris and Tartar Sauce, no one knows any of those names, but everyone knows Grumpy Cat. Even if you didn't know Vinko Bogataj's name, if I said Thrill of Victory to you, Xavier, your brain fills in Agony of Defeat. Like,
no,
even if you didn't,
that's the thing. I don't think I ever watched it.
But
It has no brain worms for me. I do not remember it at all, and that's why I'm having this this block here, because I don't remember it anyway.
But to James's earlier point, that's a phrase that transcends that show.
Precisely.
Yes, I know the phrase Agony of Defeat. Yes, I know the phrase Agony of Defeat. I did not know that it was from the Worldwide of Sports.
But all the more, like, this guy did put a worm in your brain, or at least helped propel this show putting a word in your brain, and you didn't even know it. So, look, you don't know the show. I've misplayed my audience here. But I wanted to make that last point, that even if you didn't know him, and even if you're not going to go with him, even if you didn't watch the show, he is part of the reason Thrill of Victory, Agony of Defeat, just as a turn of phrase, completely unrelated whatsoever to him, to his crash, to the show, is part of that larger lexicon. And in that way, even before we get into like the concept of going viral on the internet, Vinko Bogataj has already gone viral. That being
It's a fair
said,
point, and I will have to watch some Worldwide of Sports at some point, because now I know that there is a massive gap in my sporting knowledge.
it also seems as though there's a massive gap in the voting blocks for these two guys. And
2-1, a massive gap.
When it's three people, it is.
It's a 33% difference in the voting block. And truly, I think we brought three great guys, each of us did, for this episode. I think this was a great discussion. But when you get down to it, there is no discussion. The original viral sports clip guy, a guy that made middle schoolers across the country think that one day they could grow up and they could be big and strong and they could beat the shit out of their friends in their backyard. But a guy that has really done a lot, I think, to advance combat sports, to enter it into the mainstream. We're talking about a guy who got his name from cutting open a man with his fists. Kimbo Slice. Welcome to the Hall of Guy.
R.I.P. Kimbo, but in memoriam, we are proud to bring you in. He knocked Vinko out. What can I say? I am happy to tip my cap to democracy and to Kimbo Slice. It's not as though I have not. I'm some of those views, maybe not many, but I am some of those millions of views on his fights.
You played your part, and we all did, really. Listeners did, we did.
But some people who in particular have played a part. I mean, we'd love to give thanks to the programmers behind producer Craig Bott, and of course to our musical director Don Ham, always playing a part by helping us play that beautiful theme music. And just as Diaz said, you two, listener, play a part, and we thank you for playing it with us this week. We will be back in 1 week.
Before we go off, Xavier had alluded on the previous episode, it was likely that Aaron McKee was going to be fired. He was. Let it be the official stance of this podcast. Dawn Staley for Temple men's basketball head coach.
I'm sorry. I really like the program that Dawn Staley has built in USC. I think there's something really special there, and I understand the appeal. I don't want us to say like this really fucking awesome women's program that she's made in USC that's now produced like 2 consensus when they're playing in college best players in the world, that we need to like gut that just so she can play what's going to be a kind of middling Temple program for a while.
You don't think that if Dawn Staley was here, people would come?
Not immediately.
There's no Houston in the American next year. No Cincy. It is wide open.
It is something that I would celebrate with you if it happened. I just have, as a big fan of Dawn Staley, not just through her roots, but through Asia Wilson and South Carolina specifically, it just feels weird to see everyone want to rip her away from that so quickly.
We don't want to rip her away. We just know that she's better than all the coaches we've had.
That's absolutely true.
And certainly don't want to imply that it would be a step up to transition to the men's game. That's
no, it'd be a step down. That's a step down going to this Temple men's team.
It is a less prestigious job that she would be going into as it currently stands. But who better than a Temple Owl to restore the Temple Owls to their former glory? It is the stance of 2/3 of this podcast. And as we just established with our voting, James, that means
a vote's a vote.
But no, point well taken.
If that happens 1 week from now when we have you join us again, hopefully I'll make peace with it at that time. Until then, folks, I've been James.
I've been the very special guest, Xavier.
And I'm Diaz. And as C. Vivian Strainer once said, you cannot compare yourself to others. You cannot concern yourself with the girl next to you. As I always tell them, no guy self.
I think about that Utah Jazz game with Jahlil Okafor's home debut a lot, just because I think about I enjoy basketball a lot, love watching it. I'd like to think that I'm smarter than like the average person on the street. I don't know if I'm smarter than the average NBA fan about basketball.
Right.
But man, even from that game, I was just like, this does not feel great. There's some bad vibes to this.
I hated him so much at Duke. Like, I remember, like, that was the 1 year I ever made my own big board. And I had Jahlil Okafor, like, 24th on my board, which was, like, the lowest anybody had him was, like, 4th. And then, of course, the Sixers take him at 3. And I needed to instantly mental gymnastics, like, everything that I've ever thought about basketball. I'm like, no, actually, slow, oafish guys that are black holes are good. That's what we like to see in basketball.
It does suck that he's 20 years younger than he should have been.
Right. No, in Jahlil Okafor in 1991, he would have been a top 10 center. Like, he would have been a step below, like, that Ewing, Elijah.
Perennial all-star. Yeah, like, definitely getting down ballot MVP votes.
He would have actually woken up and given you 20 and 10 instead of the idea of waking up and giving you 20 and 10.
But we love, like, the ideas of things. That's why we love draft picks.
Listen, an MVP is an MVP, but a draft pick could be anything.
It could even be an MVP!